I appreciate everybody taking time to come and listen to my session today. Like Matt said, we are trying to do a very neutral presentation, but just to frame it up real quickly, I'm David Laster, like you said, Director of Software Solutions, and I get to see a lot of accounting system upgrades. I come from the accounting world, staff accountant, controller, national controller, budgets, financial planning, financial statements, analytics, and ERP systems implementations. And had a team that does this on a daily basis for from a lot of different angles, QuickBooks, Great Plains, other angles, as they modernize their ERP. And there's a common theme that we've learned, specifically for staffing and recruiting firms, that we're here to share today. Again, to be purely educational. At the end, I will probably introduce a little bit more, but for now, let me get my thing going here, and that will work now. All right, so from an accounting system standpoint, we've all probably heard of some of the names on the right side of the screen, right? Oracle, NetSuite. Everybody at some point in their lives has probably used QuickBooks, but there's other players, Sage, Intact. I put ours at the bottom, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, as well as the Microsoft Dynamics GP, another very popular ERP system out there that does all of that accounting work, that payables, the billables, all that good stuff. But from an accounting standpoint, with your ERP or with your ATS systems, a lot of ATS systems send their data into these ERP or accounting systems so that they can do the official financial system of record job that it's tasked with. So, ERP is really for an enterprise, but when it comes to a staffing firm, it's really the accounting system. And some firms need more sophistication than others. They have more customers, they have more volume, they have more entities than others. And those are considerations when you're trying to, grow, when you're trying to outmaneuver your competition, when you're trying to, get ahead or get caught up sometimes, and just get an edge. And my bullet on number two is many staffing companies, in all reality, they grow quickly. When you do it well, you grow quickly. And QuickBooks or whatever system that you start with typically isn't enough to keep going with. So, when you get to that point, and some of you have already probably blown way by that point, you're probably held together by some needles and thread on your current ERP, but maybe you're just starting and you're kind of getting ahead and figuring out what might, be better to maneuver into sooner. Well, this session today is about 7 topics that I want to share with you to start thinking about. We are available to answer questions on any of this type of information, but I think this 45 or so minutes that we spend together here, I think will give you some really good food for thought for when that time comes. And then, of course, I've got some essential lessons that I'll feather in. I've been doing this for 25 years, implementing ERP systems and working with staffing firms on that angle. And I've got a fair amount of information that might help speed your learning curve. So in the list of 7, right, when you're doing a presentation, you're supposed to lead with the big one, right? So let's talk about what team means first from an ERP standpoint. It's not a one-person job, okay? There's a lot of impact to having a team. There's a multiplier effect, right? There's a community. There is a common goal, right? There's diverse thought. There's all kinds of inputs when you work as a team as opposed to when you're working on yourself. So, true teams, a good example of a team, is a soldier, right? There are teams of units and battalions and all these different groups of teams that work together in that capacity. But in the corporate world, we have the accounting team, or we have, the front office team or the back office team in the staffing world. And when it comes to deploying technology, you probably want to consider having some experienced folks on the team. And I want to show you some information specifically for ERP as to why. So, survey of 1,500 companies that had gone through 2 different ERP implementations, where the first one had really failed or didn't achieve its goals. And this list of their critical factors, right? When you do an RFP or when you put together, okay, what do you need to get into a new system? Everybody wants a cheap one. They want to get in. What's the price? Because notoriously, ERP has been expensive. With the advent of subscription models, the price and the ease of implementation are easy to sell together, right? So that comes across as a key goal, thinking that's going to be important. Well, when you dig down into it here, The items at the bottom of this are kind of interesting to me as a partner. Where they're not really thinking futuristically about how is the software going to help me grow and move into the future, or when I need help, where do I get help? Am I like working on my own autonomously? What service level do I get? What if I need another company created? Where am I going to go to find that technical expertise, right? So the bottom of this list really is at the first pass doesn't seem to be really important. And when they failed or when they didn't achieve their goal and they reassessed and had to go through their second implementation of ERP in 5 years, the priorities changed dramatically. You can see how the second time that they did this, the easy button didn't matter so much. Pretty much all these ERP systems are going to be fairly easy to use, in all honesty. So let's put some emphasis on what really we've learned through the process. And what I find interesting here now is that the guys at the bottom, the eights and the tens, the level of support provided by the partner and the vendor performance track record. Guess what? Vendors are part of your teammates. So having a team play a critical factor in your ERP implementation, I think, from my experience, and agree with what this second pass ERP implementation data tells us. For the rest of the data, notice that, software's ability to fit. Okay, great. Pretty much we can make anything fit. But when you stand back and you look at the big picture, all the stuff that's at the top in red ultimately got shifted, where the green ones that were initially not so important dramatically improved in their level of critical factor ranking. This slide reshuffles the deck in case you were interested so that you can see exactly what those priorities were. And you can see the emphasis at the very top is both of them, number 1 and 2, are on team. So great, you got the team together. Let's go get going on the data. Where do you start? Okay, let's know what we're aiming for first. Let's talk about briefly master records. All ERP systems rely on these cards. Okay, we call them master records in the ERP industry. The most important one that we start off with is the chart of accounts. And different industries have their own chart of accounts, but they all generally are going to have balance sheet and income statement, income and expense accounts. They might even have unit accounts or other types of statistical, values that they store to derive, KPIs and other information. That drives your financial statements in a really important way, but it's also a key integration point for external systems. More on that later. Customers are generally a record that you want to share among other systems. So, example, if you have an applicant tracking system and you have customers that you're pushing bills through to in that ATS, and you want to bring that customer record and that customer sales activity into the ERP system, then you're going to want to sync off of an important value. The key record there would probably be the customer. You generally want to keep the customer IDs the same between systems so that they can speak cleanly with each other and don't need some form of interpretation. More on customers in a little bit. Vendors are really kind of twofold. One could be your administrative vendors, right? People you pay your healthcare for, your local transportation, or maybe events. But then you also might utilize the ERP system for paying vendors that it can handle. Some ERP systems can actually do payroll, as well as pay your 1099 or your corp to corp type of vendors. So that's a consideration as to how many and what they're named, the naming convention is, and so forth. But vendors also have tax properties, right? Do you do a tax form for them at the end of the year and so forth? So a lot of considerations about obviously those master records. The fourth one is bank accounts, of course. You can have these ERP systems as many banks as you want. And with the cloud-based systems especially, the automatic connectivity and the linking directly to your bank is something that is really kind of second nature. You want to be able to bring efficiency to both the payment and the receivings and the recordings of customer payments. So that SaaS model bank linking is really beneficial. Items themselves, items you generally think of as an item in a box or a widget, right, from the economics world. But in staffing, it's often common to use what we would say a service item, an item that is like it's a proxy, if you will, maybe temp staffing or permanent placement. okay, or maybe mileage reimbursement, things that ultimately are going to get paired up with maybe a revenue account and a cost of goods sold account, so that when you transact on that item, it knows exactly what to do. You can also write through integrations directly to general ledger, but then you're losing some clarity and some ability to perform some analytics and some drill back capacity, depending on the systems. A lot of staffing firms, at least up until COVID, had a lot of physical plant. They had branches, physical plants and branches and locations, and a lot still do. And in that event, some have been around a long time. A lot of family-run companies out there, been established a while, and they have these assets that they own, and those can be brought into a lot of these ERP systems as a fixed asset, and they can automatically perform that once a month depreciation or maintenance adjustment costs, and give you some really good reporting on assets, maybe even hardware, software that you purchase to run your organization. It really links from the purchase order to the purchase, to the asset, to depreciation, to the financial statement in a really nice, clean way. And when those core items that are the master records don't cover everything, you can add in features that fit the gap. Okay, ISV solutions, those are independent software vendor solutions. They can, and they're common to be brought in, whether it be Great Plains or NetSuite or Business Central, it doesn't matter. These things come in and they perform a special function. All right, so in this case, property leases. I put this one on here specifically because of many staffing firms have leases. Now, might not own the asset, they might lease the asset instead. So there's some complex accounting now around leasing. A lot of these ERP systems will have that, as well as this one here called MEM, or multi-entity management, which allows you to squeeze a bunch of different financial or federal ID numbers really into one database, which lowers your footprint and it eases your administration costs moving forward. Allows you to expand without having to really hire a lot of extra outside help. So moving beyond through what those are, because they are super important. Number two in the pecking order, if you will, is understanding workflow. Okay, what does workflow really mean? Well, you don't want to start and aim at recreating in your new system what you're doing in the old. Conceptually, yes, maybe. Let's break down the workflow. Let's see what you have first and what you want to go, and then what the capabilities are. So modern ERP, it comes off the shelf with probably more functions, features, buttons, reports, and analytics than you ever care to use. But for staffing and recruiting firms, I've been using it for a while. It has all that stuff, right? You don't need the manufacturing or production, and that's fine. The rest of it, ERP, accounting, is sophisticated, it's clean, it's online, it's easy to use. But the first step really here is diving into, all right, who's going to use it? Okay, we do an audit. I call this a system audit. And a lot of times I'm really understanding how many vendors, how many customers, what's the chart of accounts look like? What integrations do you have between systems? What are your, future growth, trajectory? Are you trying to, acquire companies and add companies or grow into new branches? Do you currently have 12 different environments, 2 on Great Plains, 4 on, QuickBooks or whatever, that you really want to consolidate in one place in the future? So that workflow and understanding what you have, who's doing what, why you do those things is really important, because the knowledge base that your teammate, your partner leader will have will enable them to get you there a heck of a lot faster and cleaner than if you really tried it on your own. And you'd never get there if you waited. But your team is really going to, work on putting a plan together that is concise, that addresses the functions, test scripts, maybe integrations, make sure that we target who gets trained for what and when. And this is all true up these first 3 is really, if you're one user, all of this still holds true. If you're 100 users, all of this still holds true. It doesn't matter. We still want to go through and evaluate and do a workflow type of event. And you would want that too, because you should go into it with some pretty open minds, realizing, the capabilities of what you may get out of this investment of time and energy and distraction in a way, because you're going to be changing things for a lot of people. So the last piece is configuring, a good plan that addresses all of the pieces of your implementation that you think now create that future vision. And if something's missing, it's at that point in time, to speak up and say, oh, well, what about this one thing? We only do that once a quarter or something. Great. Add it to the list so that you now have a construct of what that future would look like. but you've been doing this a while. So you have vendors and customers, and maybe you're implementing a new ATS system and you're looking at upgrading or taking care of, or maybe the need to integrate from that ATS system into your new ERP system. Well, either way, you still have this data cleansing, deduping event that you want to do with your information. So, a couple of lessons learned I definitely want to share because this slows things down almost more than anything else is dirty data. So it's an incredible point in time to do a little spring cleaning, right? I look outside and I see snow right now, but spring is upon us very soon. And if you're going to make some changes, learn from some of these do's. Take the time to know what you're going to be moving and needing to set up in the new system. So export your vendors, your customers, your chart of accounts, go through those, say, I'm going to use this vendor, I'm not going to use that vendor. And maybe you apply the 3-year rule, the 5-year rule. But having used it in 5 years, then I don't need it in the new system because I'll just recreate it over there. Okay, so you definitely want to load clean information in obviously the new systems. You don't want to just push a button and have everything show up over there. Be thoughtful. It's your company's system of record. But when you're going through this analysis and encountering the future with a design, you may end up in a position where, and this is true for a lot of folks, the chart of accounts that you have doesn't quite fit what you want. You've had it, it's legacy. Maybe some people have come and gone and they created accounts in the wrong numbering order. ERP update, modernization is the opportunity to say, well, I don't like what I have. I know I can do better. Take some time. Start with what you have, make it better in a spreadsheet. And when it's time to load that new chart of accounts into the new system, you already have this mapping file that says, all right, I know how to take all of my couple of years of history, translate that to what the new world would look like as closely as we can make it, knowing that the new world has way more to offer. But at least you can get a running start comparatively on financial statements year over year out of your first year. Um, you can understand the capabilities of the new ERP and the way that vendor cards and transaction windows are structured means that there's some opportunity there. Perfect example, customers or vendors. They might have multiple address records. They might have a remit to address, or they might have a PO box. They might have a special, ship to address. Okay, those identifiers, those cards, they may have differences between your current system and the new system. Maybe you have salespeople and banking on the vendor address card in the old system. Where does that live in the new system? Okay, so be mindful if you're really thinking about the new table structure and where you're going to take your current vendor and customer information and key it in over there. You want to get and understand the templates that your partner, your team lead will give you. Those generally have already been designed for maximum efficiency. When you take your vendors and customers and chart and your master records and put them in there, that gives us the ability to then go take that information and analyze it. Generally, there's just not a push it over. We're going to look, we're going to count records, we're going to make sure that your field lengths aren't too long. There's a number of things that we want to be cognizant of as a good partner, a good team lead before just taking that data and pushing it in a system. Remember, the do is to don't do dirty data. So then begin considering your reporting options. You used to income statements and aging reports and maybe some Excel exports and things like that, but explore what the future has, right? Power BI reports that are embedded on your homepage or link through reports with filters and analysis views and things that really help you pinpoint or get to or group or summarize information in a way more efficient way than your current or your legacy ERP system would do for you. Couple of no-nos. All right, don't assume your data is clean. I know I've probably hit the horse a couple times too hard here, but it's always worth an extra look. What will help your team go over budget more than anything is having to provide data more than once. And it's not that it's like the sandbox in the go live. It's because the first round of data wasn't good and wasn't clean. So don't do that. Don't bring over too much of the past. Remember, you're not recreating the future in the new system. You're really just getting it optimized to go take your business to new heights. So be careful, right? I've had a number of customers ask, gee, I want to bring all of my payables transactions and the payments and the credit memos and all that stuff over for the last 4 or 5 years. And I said, no, that's a no. That's a don't do that. But what you do want to do is make sure that you're able to maybe recreate the financial statements, specifically the P&L and the balance sheet, month by month for maybe 2 years plus your first year. So you get like 3 years worth of information. And then when you do go live in the new ERP, let's say everybody wants to go live January 1st, right? That's a myth. It doesn't matter. Any first of any month is generally okay. But you're going to take the old AR aging and the old ERP systems, AP aging, the open receivables and open payables. And then your team will load those into the new system so that you can pay them in the new system. Or if it's an open customer invoice, then they can pay you in the new system. So there's a way, there's a method, there's a very defined cutover plan, regardless of module or status of document at the time. So lean on your team to help you navigate that part of your journey. But it is a key piece of getting you live is to trim how much we need to bring from the past. Your old system will still be there. All right. And of course, your team needs to know the system. You'll sense, your antenna should wiggle if they don't know the new system. So just make sure that your new team, of course, is being efficient, and they're making sure that they're asking good questions, that you're answering the questions that you have while you're filling in those templates. So just about everybody needs some kind of integration. Integrations come in many forms. And for staffing firms, typically you might have a couple of different integrations or synchronizations from either a CRM system that's maintaining, customer relations and things, and then there's maybe an applicant tracking system that's dealing with the pay or the bill type of information. So you have these external systems and you want to make sure that they're speaking, or maybe they already are. You need to do a topography, right? You want to document what your current integrations are, what's going back and forth. What's the trigger for making that happen? Is it a button? Is it a timed event? Like, what is actually making the data move? What happens if it doesn't, of course? But map it out in an Greta Visio. Visio is now included, I think, with one of the lower levels of Office. So you can, have access to tools now that maybe you didn't have earlier to kind of build out, this system integrates here, it does vendors, and then it does transactions for payables. Map that out so that the rest of your team can see what you have and nothing gets missed. There's also opportunities within the new ERP systems sometimes for simple just drag and drop or copy paste. That's also a form of an integration. All right. But questions to ask: where's the data sources? Okay. What does it take to get there? Is it an API? Is it a database? Is it an Excel file? I've seen all kinds of things, SFTP site. So where do data sources reside? We got to document that as part of the process because in the new world, that's probably still there, but potentially might change because you have new technology and new ways to access that data. So how do you get, who's in charge of backing up the data, right? Who's the backup in case one person that does it can't do it? Who's the person next in line? Or if it's a scheduled task and it doesn't fire, is there a notification that goes to somebody? What happens when it doesn't work? Because that also has to be considered in the future, right? So maybe the workarounds or those band-aids or whatever are also important for us to know because it might be related to the quality of the data that's in the integration, and it usually is. So how do you get support for your integration? Of course, who to talk to on the red phone, and how do they integrate? Are they scheduled and so forth? But a note about testing. Testing is the most important part of your ERP implementation. If you have clean data and you have a good plan and these integrations are passing and handling that data well, then your testing should go pretty smoothly. But the reality is that you start off your testing, you say, yay, great, it works. But when you start to throw new use cases at it, And when you have other people try to send through their data, you really accumulate like kind of a knowledge, a library of things that could go wrong. So you train people, you handle those in the code, you do whatever it takes to try to minimize any disruption on any integrations from other systems. But you also want to make sure that you have a way, because everything is cloud-based these days. You have like the option for a production environment and a sandbox. Okay, so some testing that you need to do might be just to patch or fix something in the future. Sometimes you're doing a full-blown development and you want it nowhere near your production environment. So these modern ERP systems have, when you're evaluating or thinking about your integrations, be aware of different pieces of it because everybody really does have some kind of integration. And if you're in the staffing and recruiting world, you probably are going to have, at least on the pay side, some level of payroll. Payroll being primarily W-2 type labor. There are also a variety, and speaking strictly in the United States, of course, first, W-2, then we have our corp to corps, right, where you have a corporation that you're paying and you're doing kind of a subcontract thing. And you also have independent contractors, where they might have a 1099 accumulation over the year that you need to print tax forms for. You might have multiple addresses for those vendors, so all those are considerations when it comes to payroll, just getting the timesheet stuff done, right? But when you integrate payroll with other systems, it can get pretty complex pretty quickly. The goal generally with the payroll piece and ERP integrations is to get the general ledger right. You're consuming cash, you're booking expenses, you're booking some liabilities, so you're definitely moving a lot of things around on the chessboard. And the quality of that journal entry that you get to integrate to the payroll system is definitely worth, and clearly needs to be considered way up front, especially if you're changing systems upstream, payroll systems themselves. So payroll has a regular cadence. I've been leading payroll for a long time. It's kind of a neat thing to watch people get paid and happy, right? Timesheets are due, payroll gets processed, bank drafts and information gets sent, of course, and then employees are happy. But there's a lot in the ERP system that has to happen after that, as you well know, right? Then there's this general ledger and the cost piece. So how does this end up in the ERP, right? If you're using payroll, paychecks, or if you're using, ADP, or if you're using whoever else is out there, right? How do you get their data from payroll processing into your QuickBooks or your Great Plains or your Business Central or your NetSuite? Okay. That's an important piece of your future integration, of course. But even the current integrations have their way of doing this. So is it manual? Does somebody have to go here, click here, and do something? Does it automatically show up as a batch with transactions in it after the transactions are done in the payroll system? Is this an easy thing to do? Great copy paste, or is it a hard thing to do? Well, let's download, let's spreadsheet this, let's pivot table that, and then let's copy and let's hope it works, right? That takes time. That does not improve the accuracy or the timeliness of your financial statements. So try to move automated and easy if possible. But are the payroll entries really adding value, or are they just doing it? And that goes back to the discussion about your chart of accounts, really. And you're wanting to integrate from other systems and maybe recognize revenue and cost of goods sold in a way that you haven't been able to do that before. Maybe recognize some sort of deferrals or accruals in ways you haven't been able to do before. But with payroll specifically, are you booking, cost of goods sold to the right, let's call it financial dimension? Is it to the right branch and the right vertical? Is it adding value now because you drive that in the future as you implement new ERP? But then clearly you've got bank account reconciliation. Some of those are easy because they're drafted out and it's just one transaction for you. But if you're really maintaining the bank account, you're going to have hundreds, potentially thousands of transactions every week that you do payroll. And it's somebody's responsibility to try to make sure that that stays up to date. How do you reconcile, your payroll system against what you booked in the general ledger? Auditors ask that generally every year. And then, I said earlier, deferred, maybe unbilled calculations, at ad hoc account reconciliations for maybe prepaid expenses and things like that. Um, Financial reporting and gross margin analysis, right? Staffing game at the end of the day is about the gross margin reporting and what that ultimately, brings to the bottom line. Modern ERP systems, especially, have great capability of doing the GM tracking itself for the revenue and the cost, as well as doing grouping, subgroupings, and then having out of the box analytics that interprets that in a visual way, which is always fascinating to see your own data that way. Which brings me to number 7. It is one of my favorite things to work with is business intelligence, because to me, reporting is really where it's at, right? Once you set up the integrations and get the right chart of accounts and master records and automation, all that stuff in place, now you are ready to consume some meaningful business intelligence. And how do we do that? Typically, KPIs, right? Key performance indicators, and AI now is also playing a pretty interesting and fascinating role, actually. I myself and GraVoc, my company here, we work primarily with the Microsoft stack. We do a lot of Microsoft Power BI. I know that is a name a lot of folks have seen and heard in the past, or you might be Power BI curious. We're happy to answer any questions on that. And Microsoft Fabric is more of a data aggregation platform. Copilot, okay, and Azure has incredible capabilities for giving us insights, alerts, subscriptions, and things that's all activation based on your data. So if you really haven't seen Power BI reports before, here's a very simple, rough example of a profit and loss statement using some sample data that it's live, it's real time. You don't have to really wait for this. It can be set to auto refresh, so anytime you look at it or see it, you're able to get those analytics at your fingertips. And then additionally, some of the Power BI reports can bake in this drill through capability where you go from a summarized aggregated level with KPIs and some information. And when you find those outliers or when you're looking for that one customer or vendor to report more on, these reporting and analytics tools give you so much flexibility to carry context that you've already derived into the next element of your research. So that happens both on screen in the ERP these days, as well as through Power BI as an analytics platform. So we, GraVoc, as you can see, speak a lot about staffing. And the last number of years, we've been partnering with a lot of staffing firms across the entire country on a lot of their integration needs. And one of our flagship products is Bullhorn, primarily Bullhorn 1. We do have that automation by synchronization, all that stuff with more than one of the Microsoft ERP platforms. But we're really focusing and helping people look at if you're looking at the future, you're trying to find the modern stuff. And from the Microsoft perspective, that Microsoft Business Central cloud-based ERP system is really where Microsoft has put tremendous investments over the last decade, and has now got an incredible user base that's even surpassed that of NetSuite. So you can see that the benefits that sort of platform would offer in terms of interoperability across the entire Microsoft ecosystem, if you will, here, and these other common products that we use in the office every day is really just, it's fascinating. It's really kind of life changing. But we're not married necessarily to Bullhorn in terms of integrating ATS. We've done BBO. We've also worked with Green Shades on a project. We've worked with other ATSs as well as other some things in development. The bottom line is that we speak staffing at our company and integrating that to the ERP. And just wanted to share our lessons learned and thoughts about your potential journey. Maybe you're on that journey already, and or you're starting it, or maybe you're not quite ready for it. But hopefully, this session has really been insightful in providing 7 steps to help you get there. I saved the best for last. Again, I'm David Laster, Director of Software Solutions. I love doing ERP, as you can tell. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to actually do the session with you guys. At the bottom left corner, I do have a couple of links that I would point out in case you are interested. Number 1 is my email address. Send me a note if you have a question. I guess number two is GraVoc.com is the company that I work for here. I have a pleasure of being here for quite some time and leading an incredible team of knowledge folks, especially in the staffing and recruiting, ERP integration, and reporting space. I'm passionate about Power BI, so we develop and provide a lot of those solutions for staffing firms. So let us know if that's of interest. And then a personal passion of mine is just working with ERP. I've been with Dynamics GP ERP for 25 years, and part of my journey has been moving from Dynamics GP to Microsoft Business Central. So it's moving from the on-premise based ERP model that a lot of companies love and use. And I've learned it, I've deployed it. I'm very active in the Business Central end user community. So I have allegiance to both products in a really great way. If you're interested in learning more information about what the journey is like, some thoughts of mine and some context more about reporting or anything, there's a QR code down there. Feel free to check out my site for some of those blog posts that I've made. But Matt, I think